For 10 years, we called him the villain. We called him the problem. Some people even called him a monster. But what if the man Gwen Stefani left behind was never the real enemy at all? Because while the world was busy celebrating a perfect country fairy tale, someone else was standing quietly in the shadows, watching it all unfold. And now, as rumors swirl that Blake Shelton and Gwen's marriage may be cracking, that silence is starting to feel louder than ever. The cracks are showing. The hero is suddenly looking human. And the truth behind these so-called Hollywood upgrades is starting to look a lot uglier than anyone expected. Insiders say Gavin Rossdale isn't celebrating. He isn't smiling. He isn't enjoying the moment. What he's allegedly feeling is something far more complicated: vindication, relief, and maybe even a quiet sense of "I told you so," without ever having to say it out loud. Because the secret Gavin is rumored to have carried for a decade might finally change how people see Blake Shelton, Gwen Stefani, and that fairy tale everyone thought was untouchable. And honestly, most people weren't ready for this conversation. To understand why this moment matters, you have to go back to where the story really began, when Gwen Stefani's marriage to Gavin Rossdale ended in 2015. It wasn't a quiet, respectful split. It was loud, messy, and played out in real time across headlines, talk shows, and social media. Almost overnight, the narrative locked into place. Gavin was the bad guy, the absent rock star, the man who broke his family. Gwen was positioned as the wronged wife, the survivor who finally found the strength to walk away. And once that story took hold, there was no room for nuance. Stories spread everywhere. Accusations surfaced. Allegations involving the family nanny dominated tabloid covers. Whether every detail was accurate or not almost stopped mattering. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was already in. Gavin Rossdale was guilty. And that was that. Then, something happened that made his reputation nearly impossible to recover from. Gwen didn't just move on. She upgraded. Almost immediately after the divorce, she stepped into a new relationship that looked perfect on paper. Blake Shelton, the all-American country star, the easy smile, the ranch in Oklahoma, the guy who cracked jokes on national television and made heartbreak look like something you could laugh your way through. Blake wasn't just a new boyfriend. He became Gwen's redemption arc. Her proof that the problem had never been her. He was living evidence that Gavin was the mistake all along. The optics were brutal. Blake became Mr. Reliable. Blake became the good stepdad. Blake became everything the media said Gavin wasn't. And it didn't stop there. Gwen went on talk shows glowing, smiling, telling the world she had finally found real love. She talked about being saved, about finally feeling safe, about how this relationship was different from anything she'd known before. Meanwhile, Gavin had to watch all of this happen in public. For the next 10 years, he watched his own story get rewritten without him. He watched his 3 sons appear on social media wearing camouflage, fishing on Blake Shelton's Oklahoma ranch, playing happy family with a man the tabloids framed as the better father, the better partner, the better man. Try to imagine what that feels like. Every photo, every interview, every joke Blake made about being a stepdad landed like another quiet reminder of what Gavin had supposedly failed at. And the worst part? Gavin couldn't say a word. Any attempt to defend himself would have made him look bitter, defensive, exactly like the villain people already believed he was. So he stayed quiet. Occasionally, though, he let something slip. And looking back now, those moments hit very differently. At one point, Gavin spoke about what it takes to be with someone like Gwen Stefani. He said it takes a strong man to be with a woman who's stratospheric. He said he was always proud of her success. But then he admitted something that didn't get much attention at the time. He said the disconnect was that she felt bad when things weren't going well for him, and he thought that was a mistake. Why should a guy in a rock band compare himself to an incredible, beautiful solo artist? That doesn't sound like resentment. That sounds like a man who spent years feeling like he was never enough, and now, almost a decade later, that comment feels less like bitterness and more like foreshadowing, because fast forward to 2024, and the fairy tale between Gwen and Blake is reportedly starting to crack in ways that feel eerily familiar. According to unverified reports and online speculation, their marriage isn't as solid as it once looked. And the rumors coming out now mirror the same issues that were whispered about Gwen's first marriage. The first major rumor centers on lifestyle clashes. It's been said that Blake Shelton is exhausted by the Hollywood grind. He wants the ranch, the quiet, the simplicity, the version of life he's always talked about in his songs. Meanwhile, Gwen's world is built in Los Angeles. Red carpets, paparazzi, glam squads, image management. The machine never stops, and if that sounds familiar, that's because it's almost identical to what people claim caused friction between Gwen and Gavin, a rock star who lived messy and real, clashing with a pop icon whose career demanded constant control and perfection. But that's just the beginning. The second rumor cuts deeper. Control. Multiple sources claim Gwen is intensely hands-on with every detail of her life. Her image, her schedule, her home, her children, and allegedly her partner. The suggestion isn't that she's cruel or malicious, but that she's a perfectionist who expects everyone around her to operate at the same relentless pace she does. Years ago, Gavin was asked how being married to Gwen made him better. His answer was telling. He said she set the bar so high for success in their household that you had to come in firing on all cylinders. Then he admitted he wasn't sure he could always do that. Read between those lines. That isn't laziness. That's exhaustion. That's pressure. And the rumor now is that Blake Shelton is feeling that same weight. Think about the transformation people watched over the years. Early on, Blake was unapologetically himself. Jeans, boots, Oklahoma drawl, beer jokes. Slowly, though, he started showing up differently. Tuxedos, red carpets, LA parties. A version of Blake that felt more polished, but also less natural. According to speculation, the cowboy wore the costume for love. But now, the costume might be wearing him down. And this is where Gavin Rossdale's alleged vindication comes into focus. People close to him claim he isn't happy about Gwen's pain. He isn't rooting for their marriage to fail. But he does feel relief. Relief that the world might finally understand he wasn't the only issue. That maybe the perfect upgrade wasn't so perfect after all. For 10 years, Gavin lived with a label. Bad husband. Bad father. The man Gwen had to escape. Meanwhile, Blake was elevated as the hero who fixed everything. The proof that love could solve it all. But now that heroic narrative is cracking, and every new rumor about Blake and Gwen allegedly gives Gavin something he hasn't had in a decade: perspective. Here's the part that really changes the story, though. According to whispers from Gavin's inner circle, he doesn't feel smug. He actually feels sorry for Blake. In his eyes, Blake isn't the villain or the winner. He's the next guy. Another authentic man who fell into a world that wasn't built for him. Another partner trying to mold himself around Gwen Stefani's perfectly curated universe. Two men from completely different backgrounds. Rock and country. London and Oklahoma. But allegedly dealing with the same emotional machine. And Gwen herself has hinted at this complexity over the years. She's talked openly about anxiety, about perfectionism, about fear of things falling apart. Those traits aren't flaws. They're survival mechanisms from decades in the spotlight. But survival mechanisms can turn into cages. Not just for the person who built them, but for everyone inside. Now zoom out. Because this isn't just about them. Kelly Clarkson went through something strikingly similar. Her divorce played out publicly, and she spoke about crying alone in her car, feeling like a failure, wondering what went wrong. The difference? Kelly was given sympathy, understanding. Grace. Gavin wasn't. He was assigned a role and forced to live in it silently. And that silence lasted 10 years. No tell-all books. No messy interviews. No public battles. Just time. Raising his kids. Making music. Living under a story he couldn't control. That takes a certain kind of strength. The rumor is Gavin always believed this moment would come. That eventually, the same patterns would emerge. Not because Gwen is evil. Not because Blake is weak. But because fame magnifies incompatibility in ways love alone can't fix. This isn't about declaring Gavin innocent. We'll probably never know what truly happened behind closed doors. What this is about is balance. Acknowledging that relationships are rarely as simple as heroes and villains. Even Gwen once said she and Gavin understood each other in a way no one else could. That they had a connection they tried to protect privately. That doesn't sound like a monster. That sounds like two complicated people trying to survive fame together. And now, as Blake Shelton reportedly struggles with the same pressures, people are finally asking the question that never got asked 10 years ago. What if the story was always more complicated? What if the fairy tale was never the solution, just a temporary distraction? For Gavin Rossdale, that question might be the closest thing to vindication he'll ever get. Not applause, not revenge, just acknowledgement that there were always two sides. So now it's your turn. Was Gavin really the villain all along? Or did the world just need one? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story surprised you, stay tuned, because there's another Hollywood relationship showing the same exact patterns right now. And honestly, it might be even more dramatic than this one.